You're watching a man they've already dismissed. And what he does next, none of them will see coming. If this is the kind of story that makes you feel something, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Let me go back. Because none of this makes sense without it. Maya had been counting coins for 3 days when the knock came. Not metaphorically. Literally counting, stacking quarters on her kitchen table in columns of 4, calculating whether she had enough to cover gas and the electric bill both, knowing she probably didn't and would have to choose. The apartment was 1 room and a half, if you counted the bathroom as a half, which she did, because counting things you had made them feel more real. The coins made $14, 75, gas was $12. The electric bill was $67. The knock came at 8:43 on a Thursday night in November, which she knew because her phone was propped on the table showing the time instead of being in her pocket, because the screen had cracked 2 months ago and staying too long in her jeans caused it to lose signal. She opened the door expecting her neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, who sometimes brought over bread that was a day from expiring. The man standing in her doorway was not Mrs. Calloway, he was somewhere in his early 60s, though the roughness of his face made the estimate difficult. His coat was the kind of dark brown that had not started as dark brown, it had been other colors, maybe gray, maybe beige, and had arrived at its current shade through weather and use. He was not shaking, but he was holding very still in the way people hold still when they are trying not to show that they're cold. His shoes were mismatched, the left one a work boot with the lace replaced by a bungee cord, the right one a sneaker that had seen better versions of itself. He did not say anything for a moment. He looked at Maya the way people look when they've rehearsed something and can't remember the opening word. "I'm not asking for money," he said finally. Maya looked at the $14, 75 on her table, and thought that was fortunate. "I just need to be out of the wind," he said. One night. The shelter on Pembroke Street is full, and I walked 4 blocks in the wrong direction before I figured that out. If you have a floor somewhere I can sit on, just sit. I'm not. I won't bother you. Maya was 26 years old. She had been told by 6 different people in her life not to open her door to strangers, and she had absorbed all 6 warnings with the part of herself that knew things intellectually, and she had filed them in the place where she kept things that made theoretical sense. The other part of herself, the part that noticed he said sit and not sleep, and that he had not asked for anything before stating what he wasn't asking for, that part looked at his shoes and made the decision. "I have a couch," she said. His name, he told her, was Walter. He didn't offer a last name and she didn't ask. She made 2 cups of the instant coffee she kept for emergencies, which this qualified as in a way she hadn't anticipated, and he sat on the couch and held the cup with both hands the way you hold something when your hands are very cold and the thing is the warmest nearby object. Maya sat in the chair across from him with her own cup. She gave him the throw blanket from the back of the couch. She gave him the spare pillow from the closet. She gave him a clean washcloth and pointed out the bathroom. She showed him where the light switches were in case he needed them in the night. Walter watched all of this with an expression she couldn't categorize. Not grateful exactly, or not only. It was the expression of someone relearning something they had once known. "You don't have to do all this," he said. "I know," she said. He slept. Maya did not, for about an hour, and then she did, because exhaustion eventually overrides vigilance. She set her alarm for 6, the same time she always set it, because she had a 6 a.m. shift at the cafe downtown where she worked Tuesday through Saturday and Sundays when they needed her. The next morning she got up, started the shower. And when she came into the kitchen to make coffee, she found Walter sitting at the kitchen table looking at something on his phone. He had folded the blanket and set the pillow on top of it in a precise square on the couch. The way you learn to fold things when you have been in places where leaving things tidy matters. She made coffee without speaking because the morning had not yet entered the part where speaking felt natural. Walter's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. Something changed in the way he was sitting, not visible movement, more a shift in density, the way a room changes when someone in it makes a decision. "What is your name?" he asked. "Maya," she said. She had told him the night before. "Maya," he repeated. "Your last name." She looked at him. He was not threatening, but he was not entirely the same man who had been holding a coffee cup with both hands either. "Reyes," she said. He looked at his phone again. He set it down with the screen facing up, and she saw briefly before she looked away because it felt like reading someone's mail, that there were several messages on it and that one of them contained a number with 8 figures. "I need to make a phone call," he said. "Okay," she said. "I should probably tell you something first." What Walter told her over the next 14 minutes while Maya's coffee went from hot to lukewarm and she forgot to drink it, was this. His full name was Walter Ashford Crane. He had been, until 18 months ago, the controlling shareholder and chairman of Crane Meridian Holdings, a private investment group that managed $2 billion in real estate, logistics infrastructure, and distressed asset acquisition across 11 states. 18 months ago, following the death of his wife of 31 years, he had given operational control of the company to his executive board with the instructions that they run it without him for 1 year, no contact required. He had then, and he paused here in the way people pause when they know the next part sounds strange, walked away. He had left his phone in a drawer in his office. He had taken $200 in cash and a change of clothes. He had wanted to understand what the country looked like from the ground, he said, meaning from the position of having nothing, because he had made his fortune studying how cities treated people who had nothing, and he wanted to see if he had been right. "I was wrong about a lot of it," he said. He had been, he told her, sleeping rough for 6 weeks, a combination of shelters, overnight bus terminals, and a 3-day stretch under an overflight walkway near the waterfront that had been warmer than it looked. He had kept one phone, uncharged until now, for genuine emergencies. He had been documenting everything in a notebook. Last night's cold had hit 17 degrees, which had moved the situation from a study to an emergency. Maya listened to all of this. She did not say anything until he finished. "Why are you telling me this?" she said. "Because you gave me a pillow," he said, "and because I know who you are." He slid his phone across the table and showed her the screen. The message was from someone named Delia Frost, and it read, "Found her. Maya Reyes, 24 Callaway Street, Apt 3B. Her grandmother's case is the one you've been looking for. The demolition order is still in appeals." Maya stared at the message for a long time. "The Callaway Street building," Walter said, "is scheduled for demolition by a development group that I know very well. Too well. I've been looking at their acquisition pattern for 4 months. Your grandmother filed an appeal 18 months ago to prevent the demolition of the mural on the east wall of the building on the corner, the one she painted in 1987. The development group ignored the appeal and proceeded anyway. The city approved it because the development group's senior partner made a $340,000 donation to a city infrastructure fund 6 weeks before the vote." Maya's throat was doing something complicated. Her grandmother, Rosora Reyes, had died 8 months ago. The mural on the east wall of the building on Callaway and 9th had been the thing she was most proud of in her life. A 40-foot depiction of the neighborhood as it had existed in 1965, painted over 3 summers, preserved by hand every year. Now slated to be covered by the east foundation wall of a mixed-use development called the Meridian Quarter. The irony of that name would not occur to Maya until later. "The demolition is scheduled for the 14th, Walter said. "That's 11 days from now." He picked up his phone and dialed. The person who answered said Walter in the voice of someone who had been waiting 16 months to say it. "Get me Delia," Walter said, "and pull the Callaway Street file. All of it. Now before we go further, let me tell you about Maya Reyes, because the woman who opened her door that November night was not someone most people would have looked at twice, and that was precisely the point. She had been born in this same neighborhood, 3 blocks from the apartment she now rented. Her parents had moved to Phoenix when she was 9, chasing work, and she had stayed with her grandmother Rosora because leaving felt like abandonment, and because Rosora had never once made her feel like staying was a burden. She had grown up in a 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled like empanadas and turpentine. The turpentine because Rosora painted every weekend without exception. The empanadas because Rosora believed food was how you showed people they were worth staying for. Rosora had given Maya 3 things before she died: the throw blanket currently on the couch where Walter had slept, a brass hand mirror with a handle shaped like a fish that had belonged to Rosora's own mother, and the instruction, delivered not as advice but as a statement of fact, that goodness was the only form of wealth that compounded. Maya had taken all 3 seriously. The blanket and mirror she kept. The instruction she had tried to practice even when it was inconvenient, even when it cost her something, even when the $14.75 on the table was all she had. She had dropped out of community college after 2 semesters not because she lacked the ability but because Rosora's health had declined and someone needed to be present, and Maya had been the someone. She worked at the cafe 6 days a week, and on her 1 day off she sometimes took weekend photography gigs for events, first communions, quinceañeras, charging $150 and occasionally less when she could tell the family couldn't afford the full amount. She was not poor because she had made poor decisions. She was poor because she had made good ones, and good ones for people without the right kind of starting position often cost more than the alternatives. She did not resent this. She had thought about it enough to understand it, which is a different thing from not noticing it. The development company scheduled to demolish the corner building, and with it the mural, and with it the last large-scale remaining work of Rosora Reyes, was called Vantage Urban Partners. Its senior managing partner was a man named Denton Cole, 44, whose photograph appeared on the company's website above the word visionary and whose donation history was a matter of public record for anyone who knew where to look, which most people didn't. Denton Cole had been buying up distressed properties in this neighborhood for 3 years. He had done it methodically and efficiently, using a subsidiary structure that made it difficult to trace any single purchase back to its ultimate owner, and he had done it with the full cooperation of a city planning board whose members had received, collectively, $1 million in consulting fees across the same 3-year period. 7 families had been displaced from a building on Monroe Street, 11 from a complex on 4th Avenue. The community center on Delacroix, where Rosora had taught a painting class for 17 years, every Saturday morning, free of charge, had been purchased in a foreclosure proceeding that its board members later said they had not understood was happening until it was complete. Walter Crane knew all of this because Walter Crane had been watching Denton Cole for 2 years. What Denton Cole did not know, what almost no one knew, was that Crane Meridian Holdings owned a 23% interest in 3 of the creditor banks whose cooperation had made Cole's acquisition strategy possible. Walter had acquired those positions quietly, over time, not as a business play but because he had been tracking the capital flow and wanted to understand where it originated. He had found, at the end of that tracking, something he had not expected. A deliberate, structured campaign to hollow out a specific set of neighborhoods and replace their existing character with high-margin, mixed-use development funded by pension money from the same workers whose communities were being dismantled. He had set the documentation aside for 6 months, unsure of the proper response. And then his wife had died. And then he had walked away. And then, on a 17-degree November night, he had knocked on the door of a woman whose grandmother had painted a mural he had driven past 4 times during his 6 weeks of walking, each time stopping to look at it for longer than he intended. Rosora Reyes had painted 40 figures into that mural. Each of them was a real person, a neighbor, a shop owner, a child who had grown up on the block. She had painted them from memory and from photographs. She had painted them in the colors of the specific light of the specific hour of a specific summer day, and she had painted, in the bottom right corner, so small you had to stand close to see it, a small brass hand mirror with a handle shaped like a fish. Walter had seen it on his 3rd pass. He had stood in front of the mural for 11 minutes on a cold afternoon, looking at that mirror, thinking about the woman who had put it there and what it meant to her, and he had understood, in the specific technical way he understood things, which was different from the emotional way but arrived at the same place, that the demolition of that wall would be the destruction of something that could not be replaced or compensated. He had gone looking for the appeal records. He had found Maya. He had knocked on her door because the shelter was full and because Calloway Street was where she lived. And because sometimes the mechanics of things arrange themselves in ways that look like coincidence only until you trace them back far enough. The 11 days between Walter's phone call and the scheduled demolition were the most organized 11 days of Maya's life, and also the most disorienting, because she spent them doing things she had no framework for while simultaneously working her calf shifts because the electric bill had not become less real. Walter moved into the apartment's 2nd chair. Not literally, he found a room at a hotel 4 blocks away, the kind of hotel that rents by the week and has a laminated sign above the front desk that says checkout is at 10 and means it. But he was at Maya's kitchen table every morning by 8, on the phone with Delia Frost, who turned out to be his senior legal counsel and the person who had, quietly, kept the full Vantage Urban Partners documentation active and current during the 16 months Walter had been unreachable. Delia Frost was 51 years old, 5 feet 4 inches tall, and conducted legal strategy the way other people conducted surgical procedures, with complete concentration, very few words, and the expression of someone who has already considered all available outcomes and is simply working toward the preferred one. She arrived in the city on day 2, with a rolling suitcase and a co-counsel named Jameson Park, and set up in Walter's hotel room, which now contained 4 laptops, 2 printers, and a whiteboard that extended the full length of one wall. Maya was invited into this operation not as a client exactly, and not as a collaborator exactly, but as something that did not have a clean name, a material witness to a specific harm, and also the closest living connection to the actual subject of the harm, and also the person who had given Walter Crane a couch to sleep on at a temperature that would otherwise have become medically significant. He doesn't do things for transactional reasons, Delia told Maya on day 3, when Maya made the mistake of asking what she was supposed to be doing here. He's here because he thinks this is the right thing. Don't try to figure out what you owe him, just tell us what you know about the appeal. What Maya knew about the appeal was this: Rosora had filed it herself, 17 months ago, through a legal aid organization on 5th Street. The appeal had argued that the mural qualified for preservation under a municipal ordinance protecting significant community artwork. The city's Arts Commission had agreed provisionally and had placed the application in a review queue that had then, through a series of procedural delays that Delia identified as non-accidental within 4 hours of reading the file, been held in abeyance for 16 months without resolution. They didn't deny it, Delia said, they just never answered it, which is illegal under Section 42. 7 of the municipal code, which requires a response within 270 days. They're at day 510, that's our opening. Jameson Park was already on the phone with a federal court clerk by the time she finished the sentence. The other opening was the $340,000 donation. Walter had documentation of the donation, a campaign finance record, technically public, but buried in a sequence of PAC transfers designed to obscure the connection between Vantage Urban Partners and the City Infrastructure Fund. The connection existed. It had taken Delia's team 2 months of original research to establish it. And they had established it with enough specificity, dates, transfer amounts, intermediary account numbers that it constituted in Jameson Park's assessment a strong prima facie case for quid pro quo corruption. Strong enough to take to the DA? Maya asked. Strong enough to take to the press, Delia said, which is faster. Maya looked at Walter. Walter was looking at the whiteboard. Not yet, he said. The demolition is in 8 days, Delia said. I know. Give me 2 more days. Maya went to her calf shift. She made lattes and Americanos and one extremely complicated seasonal drink that required 4 steps and a specific ratio of oat milk that she had memorized because the customer who ordered it came in every Tuesday. She thought about her grandmother standing in front of a 40-foot wall with a brush and a concept and 37 years of belief that the neighborhood deserved to be recorded. She thought about the brass mirror on the windowsill in her apartment, Rosora's mother's mirror, passed down, now hers, and about the small painted version of it in the mural's corner. She thought about what it meant that a man in a bungee cord shoe had been standing in front of that mural and had seen it. On day 5, Walter asked her to come with him to a meeting. The meeting was in a conference room on the 14th floor of a building downtown that she had walked past 100 times and never entered. The room had glass walls, a view of the river, and 8 people seated around a table, most of whom were wearing the specific kind of attire that means someone has made a decision about how they want to present their own seriousness. Denton Cole was at the head of the table. He was not what Maya had constructed from his photograph. The photograph had suggested a person of polished confidence, the actual person was polished confidence, performed with the precision of someone who had practiced it for long enough that it was no longer distinguishable from the real thing except in very specific circumstances. He smiled when Walter walked in, and it was a warm, professional smile. The kind you give someone whose presence you recognize as significant. He did not look at Maya. Walter sat down. Maya sat next to him. Delia sat next to Maya. Jameson Park sat at the far end of the table with a thin folder in front of him and did not open it. Walter, Denton said. It's been a while. It has, Walter said. This is Maya Reyes. Her grandmother painted the mural. Denton looked at Maya for the first time. His expression did not change, which was itself an expression. We've been sensitive to the community concerns, he said. We have documentation of our outreach process. You didn't notify the legal representative on the preservation appeal, Walter said. You used a mailing address the legal aid office had vacated 14 months ago. The mailing came back undeliverable and you marked the outreach complete. Denton's expression shifted by 3 degrees. That was a procedural, and the donation, Walter said, to the infrastructure fund. 6 weeks before the planning board vote. The room was very quiet. I want to be clear about what I'm here to do, Walter said. I'm not here to litigate. I'm here to offer you an alternative to being litigated. Jameson Park opened the folder. He slid a single sheet of paper down the length of the table. Denton looked at it. He picked it up. He read it carefully with the thoroughness of someone who has learned that careful reading is better than the alternative. The paper contained 3 items. The first was a summary of the federal filing Jameson had initiated 2 days earlier, seeking a temporary restraining order on the demolition pending review of the procedural violations in the preservation appeal. The second was a brief accounting of the donation transfer chain. The third was a list of 26 names. Those are reporters, Walter said. I'm not going to send them anything. I'm making the choice not to. What I want in exchange for that choice is the following. He did not raise his voice. He did not shift his posture. Preservation of the mural wall, permanent easement in favor of the City Arts Commission. A $200,000 grant to the Rosora Reyes Community Arts Foundation, which we will establish and govern, for the ongoing maintenance and documentation of neighborhood artwork in this district, and a public statement from Vantage Urban Partners acknowledging the contribution of Rosora Reyes to the cultural record of this neighborhood. Denton Cole looked at the paper for a long time. That's a lot, he said. It's less than the alternative, Delia said. She said it the way someone says something when they have already decided not to say it again. Denton looked at his own legal counsel, a man at the far left of the table who had not spoken, and something passed between them that Maya could not read. We'll need 48 hours, Denton said. You have 24, Walter said. The Tro hearing is at 9 a.m. the day after tomorrow. I will need your decision before 8. He stood. Maya stood. Delia and Jameson stood. They walked out of the conference room in the order they had entered and said nothing in the elevator on the way down. In the lobby, Maya stopped. What if he says no? She said. Walter looked at her. He looked the way he had looked on the couch that first morning, relearning something. Then we go to the hearing, he said. And we win that way instead. It takes longer and it costs him more. I gave him the choice because it was the right thing to offer. But the outcome is the same either way. Maya thought about her grandmother, who had painted a mirror into the corner of a mural so small you had to stand close to see it. Why the mirror? She had asked Rosora once. Because the neighborhood should be able to see itself, Rosora had said. Not what outsiders see when they look at it. What it actually is. Denton Cole called at 7:51 the next morning. He agreed to all 3 terms. The agreement was signed the same day by both parties' legal teams, notarized, and filed with the City Arts Commission by 4 p.m. The demolition permit was formally suspended at 4:17. The east wall of the building on Callaway and 9th Street was designated a protected site under the Municipal Preservation Ordinance, the same ordinance under which Rosora Reyes had originally filed her appeal, which had been held in procedural abeyance for 510 days and was now, finally, resolved. Maya stood in front of the mural that evening. It was 7 degrees warmer than it had been the night Walter knocked on her door, which still made it cold, but she stood there for a while. The figures in the painting were lit by the street light at the corner, and they looked, as they always looked in this specific light. Less like figures in a painting and more like people caught mid-motion and preserved at exactly the speed of still. She found the mirror in the corner. She found the woman holding it, Rosora's mother Elena, who had died in 1971 and whose face Maya had only ever seen in this painting and in a single photograph, and she thought about what it meant to make something permanent in a place that keeps trying to erase itself. The next morning Walter came to the cafe. He sat at the counter, which was not a thing customers usually did. And Maya made him a coffee without asking how he took it, because she had made it for him 11 mornings now and knew, black, no sugar, hot enough to matter. He put an envelope on the counter. "This is not a transaction," he said. She looked at the envelope without opening it. "The foundation will need a director," he said, "someone who knows the neighborhood, knows the work, knows what it's for. The position comes with a salary. It comes with a budget for documentation equipment, cameras, archival materials. It comes with the legal authority to file preservation appeals on behalf of community artwork anywhere in the district." Maya looked at the envelope. "There are 847 buildings in this district," Walter said. "I don't know how many of them have artwork worth preserving. I suspect it's more than the current record shows. Someone should find out." She picked up the envelope. She held it with both hands the way he had held the coffee cup on that first night, as if the thing itself was the warmest nearby object. "What happened to you during those 6 weeks?" she said. "Walking around." "What did you actually learn?" He was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of someone who doesn't have an answer, but the quiet of someone deciding which true answer is the right one to give. "That most of what I thought I knew about how this works," he said. "I knew from the outside. And the outside is a very incomplete view." He wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. "Your grandmother understood something I spent 50 years learning. That the record matters. The record of who was here, what they made, what they valued. If you don't keep the record, the erasure becomes the record." Maya thought about that for a long time after he left. The cafe had 4 other customers that morning. She made their drinks, she remembered their names, she wiped the counter in the specific motion that got the dried coffee off the far edge where the cloth usually missed. She did all of it with the ordinary care of someone who has always done ordinary things with care, because that is who she was, because Rosora had shown her that was what you do. What happened to Denton Cole in the months that followed was not Maya's doing, and she wants that said clearly. Jameson Park had filed the federal TRO documentation. That documentation had been reviewed by a federal court clerk, and then by a judge, and the judge had noted, without anyone asking her to note it, that the chain of transfers connecting Vantage Urban Partners to the City Infrastructure Fund appeared to warrant referral to the U.S. Attorney's Office for independent review. That referral went out the same week the demolition permit was suspended. The U.S. Attorney's Office assigned an investigator. The investigator found what Delia's team had found, and then found more, because the investigator had subpoena power that Delia did not. The additional material included a second set of transfers, not to a city fund but to 3 individual planning board members, routed through a consulting firm that had performed no actual consulting, and a set of internal communications at Vantage Urban Partners in which Denton Cole and 2 senior partners discussed, in explicit terms, the strategy of using procedural delay to exhaust appellants' resources rather than responding to their appeals on the merits. The investigation became public in February, 4 months after the agreement was signed. Denton Cole resigned from Vantage Urban Partners on the day the story ran in the paper. The company's development permits in the district were placed under a city-ordered review. 2 planning board members resigned within the following week. The $340,000 donation to the infrastructure fund was flagged for return pending the outcome of the investigation. None of this required Walter's direct participation. He had provided the initial documentation to Delia, who had filed the TRO application, which had been reviewed by a judge doing her job. The consequential machinery ran on its own momentum from there. Walter told Maya this specifically and deliberately. "I want you to understand the distinction," he said. "I made one move. I filed a legal action with documentation I believed was accurate. What happened after that was the system working. The system failing first and then working. It works slowly, and it has to be prompted, and someone has to stand in the right place to prompt it. But when it works by its own authority, not mine." Maya understood this better than he might have expected, because Rosora had made the same distinction about the mural. "I didn't force anyone to pay attention to it," Rosora had told her once. "I just put it where they'd have to walk past it. The rest was up to them." The Rosora Reyes Community Arts Foundation opened its offices in March, in a ground-floor space 2 blocks from the mural. Maya hired a part-time archivist named Cecilia Park, who had a background in art history and a second background in neighborhood organizing, and who had been working for less money than her skills warranted because the organizations that needed her couldn't pay what she was worth. The Foundation's first act was to commission a full photographic documentation of every piece of community artwork in the district. Murals, mosaics, painted storefronts, sculptural elements on building facades. The survey found 211 pieces. 42 of them were in buildings currently under development pressure, meaning their existence was unrecorded in any official archive and their legal status was unprotected. Maya filed preservation appeal inquiries for all 42 on the same day. The City Arts Commission, now operating under new leadership following the resignations, responded to all 42 within 14 days. The brass mirror from Rozora's windowsill sat on Maya's desk in the Foundation office. It was not decorative exactly. Maya used it occasionally as an actual mirror, because the light in the office came from the east in the mornings and hit the corner of her desk in a way that made it useful. But it was also what it had always been, the thing that had been passed down, the thing that carried the instruction, the record of what the people who came before her had understood about seeing clearly. If this story stayed with you, if you sat here for the full length of it, you already understand what it's about. It is not about a wealthy man rescuing a poor woman. Walter would be the first to say so, and he has said so, directly. In a conversation Maya has described as somewhat uncomfortable for both of them. What happened was not a rescue. What happened was a woman who had one pillow gave it to someone who needed it, and that act, ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of thing that happens every night in cities and goes unrecorded, turned out to be the beginning of something that could not have been planned. Rozora Reyes spent 37 years painting a neighborhood that people kept trying to decide was not worth keeping. She painted it anyway. She painted it small enough that you had to stand close to see all of it, and she trusted that people who needed to see it would stand close enough. The mirror is still on Maya's desk. It is brass, tarnished at the edges in the specific way old brass tarnishes, not rust, more like depth, more like the object has earned a patina from being used and held and passed between people who understood its value. The fish on the handle has a small nick in its tail from a time it was dropped, which Rozora had never repaired because she thought the nick made it look like it had been somewhere. Maya keeps it there because it is useful, and because it is hers, and because it is the record. The record, as Rozora understood, and as Walter eventually learned, and as Maya has always known, is not a monument. It is not a declaration. It is simply the decision to write down what was here, so that the people who come after you know that something was here, that someone stood here, that the standing mattered. 42 preservation appeals, 211 pieces of recorded artwork, 847 buildings in a district that has been told, in various administrative vocabularies for 3 generations, that it is transitional. It is not transitional. It is a place where people have lived and painted and taught art classes on Saturday mornings and counted quarters on kitchen tables and opened their doors to strangers in the cold, and those things are worth recording, and Maya Reyes is recording them. If you've ever had to choose between staying quiet and speaking up, or between keeping something small and giving it to someone who needed it more, leave that story in the comments. The people who tell those stories are the reason this channel exists. We're here every week with stories like this one. Subscribe so you're here when the next one lands.